Book 2, Chapter 6 of The World's Desire. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Marcel D. Ward, thesoulexpands.com. The World's Desire by H. Rider Haggard. Book 2, Chapter 6, The Wardens of the Gate. The clamor swelled or sank, and the men called or cried the names of many women, some dead, some lost. Others were mute, silent in the presence of the world's desire, silent as when we see lost faces in a dream. The wanderer had looked once, and then cast down his eyes and stood with his face hidden in his hands. He alone waited and strove to think. The rest were abandoned to the bewilderment of their passions and their amaze. What was it that he had seen? That which he had sought his whole life long, sought by sea and land, not knowing what he sought. For this he had wandered with a hungry heart, and now was the hunger of his heart to be appeased? Between him and her was the unknown barrier and the invisible death. Was he to pass the unmarked boundary to force those guarded gates and achieve where all had failed? Had a magic deceived his eyes? Did he look but on a picture and a vision that some art could call again from the haunted place of memory? He sighed and looked again. Lo, in his charmed sight a fair girl seemed to stand upon the pylon brow, and on her head she bore a shining urn of bronze. He knew her now. He had seen her thus at the court of King Tyndareus, as he drove in his chariot through the ford of Eurotas. Thus he had seen her also in the dream on the silent isle. Again he sighed, and again he looked. Now in his charmed sight a woman sat, whose face was the face of the girl, grown more lovely far, but sad with grief and touched with shame. He saw her and he knew her. So he had seen her in Troy towers when he stole thither in a beggar's guise from the camp of the Achaeans. So he had seen her when she saved his life in Ilios. Again he sighed, and again he looked. And now he saw the golden Helen. She stood upon the pylon's brow. She stood with arms outstretched, with eyes upturned, and on her shining face there was a smile like the infinite smile of the dawn. Oh, now indeed he knew the shape that was beauty's self, the innocent spirit of love sent on earth by the undying gods, to be the doom and the delight of men, to draw them through the ways of strife to the unknown end. A while the golden Helen stood thus, looking up and out to the worlds beyond, to the peace beyond the strife, to the goal beyond the grave. Thus she stood while men scarce dared to breathe, summoning all to come and take that which upon the earth is guarded so invincibly. Then once more she sang, and as she sang slowly drew herself away, till at length nothing was left of the vision of her save the sweetness of her dying song. Who wins his love shall lose her, who loses her shall gain, for still the spirit woos her, a soul without a stain, and memory still pursues her, with longings not in vain. He loses her who gains her, who watches day by day the dust of time that stains her, the griefs that leave her gray, the flesh that yet enchains her, whose grace hath passed away. Oh, happier he who gains not the love some seem to gain, the joy that custom stains not shall still with him remain, the loveliness that wanes not, the love that ne'er can wane. In dreams she grows not older, the lands of dream among, though all the world wax colder, though all the songs be sung. In dreams doth he behold her, still fair and kind and young. Now the silence died away, and again madness came upon those who had listened and looked. The men without the wall once more hurled themselves against the gates, while the women clung to them, shrieking curses on the beauty of the Hathor. For the song meant nothing to these women, and their arms were about those whom they loved and who won them their bread. But most of the men who were in the outer court rushed up to the inner gates within which stood the alabaster shrine of the Hathor. Some flung themselves upon the ground and clutched at it, as in dreams men fling themselves down to be saved from falling into a pit that has no bottom. Yet, as in such an evil slumber, the dreamer is drawn inch by inch to the mouth of the pit by an unseen hand, so these wretched men were dragged along the ground by the might of their own desire. In vain they set their feet against the stones to hold themselves from going, for they thrust forward yet more fiercely with their hands, and thus little by little drew near the inner gates, writhing forwards, yet moving backwards, like a wounded snake dragged along by a rope. For of those who thus entered the outer court and looked upon the Hathor, few might go back alive. Now the priest drew the cloths from their eyes, and rising, flung wide the second gates, and there, but a little way off, the veil of the shrine wavered as if in a wind. For now the doors beyond the veil were thrown open, as might be seen when the wind swayed its Tyrian web, and through the curtain came the sound of the same sweet singing. "Draw near, draw near," cried the ancient priest. "Let him who would win the Hathor draw near." Now at first the Wanderer was minded to rush on, but his desire had not wholly overcome him, nor had his wisdom left him. He took counsel with his heart, and waited to let the others go, and to see how it fared with them. The worshippers were now hurrying back and now darting onwards as fear and longing seized them, till the man who was blind drew near, led by the hand of a priest, for his hound might not enter the second court of the temple. "Do ye fear?" he cried. "Cowards, I fear not. It is better to look upon the glory of the Hathor and die than to live and never see her more. Set my face straight, ye priests, set my face straight. At the worst, I can but die." So they led him as near the curtains as they dared to go, and set his face straight. Then with a great cry he rushed on, but he was caught and whirled about like a leaf in a wind, so that he fell. He rose and again rushed on, again to be whirled back. The third time he rose and rushed on, smiting with his blind man's staff. The blow fell and stayed in mid-air, and there came a hollow sound as of a smitten shield, and the staff that dealt the blow was shattered. Then there was a noise like the noise of clashing swords, and the man instantly sank down dead, though the Wanderer could see no wound upon him. Draw near," cried the priest again. "This one has fallen. Let him who would win the Hathor draw near." Then the man who had fled from the host of the Apura rushed forward, crying on the lion of his tribe. Back he was hurled, and back again, but at the third time, once more, there came the sound of clashing swords, and he too fell dead. Draw near, cried the priest. "Another has fallen. Let him who will win the Hathor draw near." And now man after man rushed on, to be first hurled back and then slain of the clashing swords. And at length all were slain save the Wanderer alone. Then the priest spake. "Wilt thou indeed rush on to doom, thou glorious man? Thou hast seen the fate of many. Be warned and turn away." "Never did I turn from man or ghost," said the Wanderer, and drawing his short sword, He came near, warily covering his head with his broad shield, while the priest stood back to see him die. Now the Wanderer had marked that none were touched till they stood at the very threshold of the doorway. Therefore he uttered a prayer to Aphrodite and came on slowly till his feet were within a bow's length of the threshold. And there he stood and listened. Now he could hear the very words of the song that the Hathor sang as she wove at her loom. So dread and sweet it was, that for a while he thought no more on the guardians of the gate, nor of how he might win the way, nor of aught save the song, for she was singing shrill and clear in his own dear tongue, the tongue of the Achaeans. Paint with threads of gold and scarlet, paint the battles fought for me, all the wars for Argive Helen, storm and sack by land or sea, all the tale of loves and sorrows that have been and are to be. Paint her lips that like a cup have pledged the lips of heroes all. Paint her golden hair unwhitened while the many winters fall. Paint the beauty that is mistress of the wide world and its thrall. Paint the storms of ships and chariots, rain of arrows flying far. Paint the waves of warfare leaping up at beauty like a star that pale and trembling hangs above the waves of war. Paint the ancient Ilios fallen. Paint the flames that scaled the sky, when the foe was in the fortress, when the trumpet and the cry rang of men in their last onset, men whose hour had dawned to die. Woe for me once loved of all men, me that never yet have known how to love the hearts that loved me. Woe for woe who hear the moan of my lovers' ghosts that perished in their cities overthrown. Is there not of gods or mortals, O ye gods, is there not one whose heart shall mate with my heart, one to love ere all be done? All the tales of wars that shall be for my love beneath the sun? Now the song died away, and the Wanderer once more bethought him of the wardens of the gate, and of the battle which he must fight. But as he braced himself to rush on against the unseen foe, the music of the singing swelled forth again, and whether he willed it or willed it not, so sweet was its magic that there he must wait till the song was done. And now stronger and more gladly rang the sweet, shrill voice, like the voice of one who has made moan through the livelong winter night, and now sees the chariot of the dawn climbing the eastern sky. And thus the Hathor sang: Ah, within my heart a hunger for the love unfelt, unknown, stirs at length and wakes and murmurs as a child that wakes to moan, left to sleep within some silent house of strangers and alone. So my heart awakes, and waking, moans with hunger and with cold, cries in pain of dim remembrance for the joy that was of old, for the love that was, that shall be, half forgotten, half foretold. Have I dreamed it or remembered? In another world was I, lived and loved in alien seasons, moved beneath a golden sky, in a golden clime, where never came the strife of men that die. But the gods themselves were jealous, for our bliss was overgreat, and they brought on us division and the horror of their hate. And they set the snake between us, and the twining coils of fate. And they said, Go forth and seek each other's face, and only find shadows of that face ye long for. Dreams of days left far behind, love the shadows, and be loved with loves that waver as the wind. Once more the sweet singing died away, but as the Wanderer grasped his sword and fixed the broad shield upon his arm, he remembered the dream of Meriamun the Queen, which had been told him by Ray the priest. For in that dream twain who had sinned were made three, and through many deaths and lives must seek each other's face. And now it seemed that the burden of the song was the burden of the dream. Then he thought no more on dreams or songs or omens, but only on the deadly foe that stood before him wrapped in darkness, and on Helen, in whose arms he yet should lie. For so the goddess had sworn to him in sea-girt Ithaca. He spoke no word, he named no god, but sprang forward as a lion springs from his bed of reeds. And lo, his buckler clashed against shields that barred the way, and invisible arms seized him to hurl him back. But no weakling was the wanderer, thus to be pushed aside by magic, but the stoutest man left alive in the whole world now that Aias, Telamon's son, was dead. The priests wondered as they saw how he gave back never a step for all the might of the wardens of the gate, but lifted his short sword and hewed down so terribly that fire leapt from the air where the short sword fell, the good short sword of Euryalus the Phaeacian. Then came the clashing of the swords, and from all the golden armor that once the godlike Paris wore, from buckler, helm, and greaves, and breastplate the sparks streamed up as they stream from the anvil of the smith, when he smites great blows on swords made white with fire. Swift as hail fell the blows of the unseen blades upon the golden armor, but he who wore it took no harm, nor was it so much as marked with the dint of the swords. So while the priests wondered at this miracle, the viewless wardens of the gate smote at the wanderer, and the wanderer smote at them again. Then of a sudden he knew this, that they who barred the path were gone, for no more blows fell, and his sword only cut the air. Then he rushed on, and passed behind the veil, and stood within the shrine. But as the curtain swung behind him, the singing rose again upon the air, and he might not move, but stood fixed with his eyes gazing where, far up, a loom was set within the shrine. For the sound of the singing came from behind the great web gleaming in the loom, the sound of the song of Helen, as she heard the swords clash and the ringing of the harness of those whose knees were loosened in death. It was thus she sang. Clamor of iron on iron and shrieking of steel upon steel. Hark how they echo again. Life with the dead is at war, and the mortals are shaken and reel. The living are slain by the slain. Clamor of iron on iron, like music that chimes with a song. So with my life doth it chime, and my footsteps must fall in the dance of Uranus, a revel of wrong, to the day of the passing of time. Ghosts of the dead that have loved me, your love have been vanquished of death. But unvanquished of death is your hate. Say, is there none that may woo me and win me of all that draw breath? Not one, but is envied of fate. Now the song died, and the wanderer looked up, and before him stood three shadows of mighty men clad in armor. He gazed upon them, and he knew the blazons painted on their shields. He knew them for heroes long dead, Pirithous, Theseus, and Aias. They looked upon him, and then cried with one voice, Hail to thee, Odysseus of Ithaca, son of Laertes! Hail to thee, cried the wanderer, Theseus, Aegeus' son! Once before didst thou go down into the house of Hades, and alive thou camest forth again. Hast thou crossed yet again the stream of ocean? And dost thou live in the sunlight? For of old I sought thee, and found thee not in the house of Hades. The semblance of Theseus answered, In the house of Hades I abide this day, and in the fields of Asphodel, but that thou seest is a shadow, sent forth by Queen Persephone to be the guard of the beauty of Helen. Hail to thee, Pirithous, Ixion's son! Cried the wanderer again. Hast thou yet won the dread Persephone to be thy love? And why doth Hades give his rival holiday to wander in the sunlight? For of old I sought thee, and found thee not in the house of Hades. Then the semblance of Pirithous answered, In the house of Hades I dwell this day, and that thou seest is but a shadow, which goes with the shadow of the hero Theseus. For where he is, I am I, and where he goes, I go. And our very shadows are not sundered, but we guard the beauty of Helen. Hail to thee, Aias Telamon's son, cried the Wanderer. Hast thou not forgotten thy wrath against me for the sake of those accursed arms that I won from thee, the arms of Achilles, son of Peleus? For of old in the house of Hades I spoke to thee, but thou wouldst not answer one word, so heavy was thine anger. Then the semblance of Aias made answer, with iron upon iron, and the stroke of bronze on bronze, would I answer thee, if I were yet a living man, and looked upon the sunlight. But I smite with a shadowy spear, and slay none but men foredoomed. And I am the shade of Aias who dwells in Hades. Yet the Queen Persephone sent me forth to be the guard of the beauty of Helen. Then the Wanderer spake. Tell me, ye shadows of the sons of heroes, is the way closed, and do the gods forbid it? Or may I, that am yet a living man, pass forward and gaze on that ye guard, on the beauty of Helen? Then each of the three nodded with his head, and smote once upon his shield, saying, Pass by, but look not back upon us till thou hast seen thy desire. Then the Wanderer went by into the innermost chamber of the alabaster shrine. Now when the shadows had spoken thus, they grew dim and vanished, and the Wanderer, as they had commanded, drew slowly up on the alabaster shrine, till at length he stood on the hither side of the web upon the loom. It was a great web, wide and high, and hid all the innermost recesses of the shrine. Here he waited, not knowing how he should break in upon the Hathor. As he stood wondering thus, his buckler slipped from his loosened hand, and clashed upon the marble floor. And as it clashed, the voice of the Hathor took up the broken song, and thus she sang ever more sweetly. Ghosts of the dead that have loved me, your love has been vanquished by death, but unvanquished by death is your hate. Say, is there none that may woo me and win me of all that draw breath? Not one but is envied of fate? None that may pass you unwounded, unscathed of invisible spears. By the splendor of Zeus there is one, and he comes, and my spirit is touched as Demeter is touched by the tears of the spring and the kiss of the sun. For he comes, and my heart that was chill as a lake in the season of snow is molten and glows as with fire. And the love that I knew not is born, and he laughs in my heart, and I know the name in the flame of desire. As a flame I am kindled, a flame that is blown by a wind from the north, by a wind that is deadly with cold, and the hope that awoke in me faints, for the love that is born shall go forth to my love, and shall die as of old. Now the song sobbed itself away, but the heart of the Wanderer echoed to its sweetness as a lyre moans and thrills when the hand of the striker is lifted from the strings. For a while he stood thus, hidden by the web upon the loom, while his limbs shook like the leaves of the tall poplar, and his face turned white as turn the poplar leaves. Then desire overcame him, and a longing he could not master, to look upon the face of her who sang, and he seized the web upon the loom and rent it with a great rending noise, so that it fell down on either side of him, and the gold coils rippled at his feet. End of Book 2, Chapter 6. Recording by Marcel D. Ward, thesoulexpands.com. Book 2, Chapter 7 of The World's Desire. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Marcel D. Ward, thesoulexpands.com. The World's Desire by H. Rider Haggard. Book 2, Chapter 7. The torn web fell. The last veil of the strange Hathor. It fell, and all its unraveled threads of glittering gold and scarlet rippled and coiled about the Wanderer's feet, and about the pillars of the loom. The web was torn, the veil was rent, the labor was lost, the pictured story of loves and wars was all undone. But there, white in the silvery dusk of the alabaster shrine, there was the visible Helen, the bride and the daughter of mystery, the world's desire. There shone that fabled loveliness of which no story was too strange, of which all miracles seemed true. There, her hands folded on her lap, her head bowed, there sat she whose voice was the echo of all sweet voices, she whose shape was the mirror of all fair forms, she whose changeful beauty, so they said, was the child of the changeful moon. Helen sat in a chair of ivory, gleaming even through the sunshine of her outspread hair. She was clothed in soft folds of white. On her breast gleamed the star-stone, the red stone of the sea deeps that melts in the sunshine. But that melted not on the breast of Helen. Moment by moment the red drops from the ruby heart of the star fell on her snowy raiment, fell and vanished, fell and vanished, and left no stain. The Wanderer looked on her face, but the beauty and the terror of it, as she raised it, were more than he could bear, and he stood like those who saw the terror and the beauty of that face which changes men to stone. For the lovely eyes of Helen stared wide, her lips yet quivering with the last notes of song, were wide open in fear. She seemed like one who walks alone, and suddenly, in the noonday light, meets the hated dead, encountering the ghost of an enemy come back to earth with the instant summons of doom. For a moment the sight of her terror made even the Wanderer afraid. What was the horror she beheld in this haunted shrine, where was none save themselves alone? What was with them in the shrine? Then he saw that her eyes were fixed on his golden armor, which Paris once had worn, on the golden shield with the blazon of the white bull, on the golden helm whose visor was down so that it quite hid his eyes and his face. And then at last her voice broke from her. "Paris, Paris, Paris! Has death lost hold of thee? Hast thou come to drag me back to thee and to shame? Paris, dead Paris, who gave thee courage to pass the shadows of men whom on earth thou hadst not dared to face in war?" Then she wrung her hands and laughed aloud with the empty laugh of fear. A thought came into that crafty mind of the Wanderer's, and he answered her, not in his own voice, but in the smooth, soft, mocking voice of the traitor Paris, whom he had heard forswear himself in the oath before Ilios. "So, lady, thou hast not yet forgiven Paris. Thou weavest the ancient web, thou singest the ancient songs. Art thou still unkind as of old? Why art thou come back to taunt me?" she said, and now she spoke as if an old familiar fear and horror were laying hold of her and mastering her again after long freedom. "Was it not enough to betray me in the semblance of my wedded lord? Why dost thou mock?" "In love all arts are fair," he answered in the voice of Paris. "Many have loved thee, lady, and they are all dead for thy sake, and no love but mine has been more strong than death. There is none to blame us now, and none to hinder. Troy is down, the heroes are white dust. Only love lives yet. Wilt thou not learn, lady, how a shadow can love? She had listened with her head bowed, but now she leaped up with blazing eyes and face of fire. "Begone!" she said. "The heroes are dead for my sake and to my shame, but the shame is living yet. Begone! Never in life or death shall my lips touch the false lips that lied away my honor, and the false face that wore the favor of my lords." For it was by shape-shifting and magic art, as poets tell, that Paris first beguiled fair Helen. Then the Wanderer spoke again with the sweet, smooth voice of Paris, son of Priam. "As I passed up the shrine where thy glory dwells, Helen, I heard thee sing, and thou didst sing of the waking of thy heart, of the arising of love within thy soul, and of the coming of one for whom thou dost wait, whom thou didst love long since and shalt love for evermore. And as thou sangest, I came, I, Paris, who was thy love and who am thy love, and who alone of ghosts and men shall be thy love again. Wilt thou still bid me go?" "I sang," she answered. "Yes, as the gods put it in my heart, so I sang. For indeed it seemed to me that one came who was my love of old, and whom alone I must love, alone forever. But thou wast not in my heart, thou false Paris. Nay, I will tell thee, and with the name will scare thee back to hell. He was in my heart whom once as a maid I saw driving in his chariot through the ford of Eurotas, while I bore water from the well. He was in my heart whom once I saw in Troy, when he crept thither, clad in beggar's guise. Ay, Paris, I will name him by his name, for though he is long dead, yet him alone methinks I loved from the very first, and him alone I shall love till my deathlessness is done. Odysseus, son of Laertes, Odysseus of Ithaca. He was named among men, and Odysseus was in my heart as I sang, and in my heart he shall ever be, though the gods in their wrath have given me to others, to my shame, and against my will." Now when the Wanderer heard her speak, and heard his own name upon her lips, and knew that the golden Helen loved him alone, it seemed to him as though his heart would burst his harness. No word could he find in his heart to speak, but he raised the visor of his helm. She looked. She saw and knew him for Odysseus, even Odysseus of Ithaca. Then in turn she hid her eyes with her hands, and speaking through them, said, "O Paris, ever wast thou false, but ghost or man, of all thy shames, this is the shamefullest. Thou hast taken the likeness of a hero dead, and thou hast heard me speak such words of him as Helen never spoke before. Fie on thee, Paris, fie on thee, who wouldst trick me into shame, as once before thou didst trick me in the shape of Menelaus, who was my lord. Now I will call on Zeus to blast thee with his bolts. Nay, not on Zeus will I call, but on Odysseus' self. Odysseus, Odysseus, come thou from the shades and smite this Paris, this trickster, who even in death finds ways to mock thee." She ceased, and with eyes upturned and arms outstretched, murmured, "Odysseus, Odysseus, come." Slowly the Wanderer drew near to the glory of the golden Helen. Slowly, slowly he came, till his dark eyes looked into her eyes of blue. Then at last he found his voice and spake. "Helen, Argive Helen," he said, I am no shadow come up from hell to torment thee, and of Trojan Paris I know nothing. For I am Odysseus, Odysseus of Ithaca, a living man beneath the sunlight. Hither am I come to see thee, hither I am come to win thee to my heart. For yonder in Ithaca Aphrodite visited me in a dream, and bade me wander out upon the seas till at length I found thee, Helen, and saw the red star blaze upon thy breast. And I have wandered, and I have dared, and I have heard thy song, and rent the web of fate, and I have seen the star, and lo, at last I find thee. Well, I saw thou knewest the arms of Paris, who was thy husband, and to try thee I spoke with the voice of Paris, as of old thou didst feign the voices of our wives when we lay in the wooden horse within the walls of Troy. Thus I drew the sweetness of thy love from thy secret breast, as the sun draws out the sweetness of the flowers. But now I declare myself to be Odysseus, clad in the mail of Paris, Odysseus come on this last journey to be thy love and Lord. And he ceased. She trembled and looked at him doubtfully, but at last she spoke. Well do I remember, she said, that when I washed the limbs of Odysseus in the halls of Ilios, I marked a great white scar beneath his knee. If indeed thou art Odysseus, and not a phantom from the gods, show me that great scar. Then the wanderer smiled, and resting his buckler against the pillar of the loom, drew off his golden greave, and there was a scar that the boar dealt with his tusk on the Parnassian hill when Odysseus was a boy. Look, lady, he said, is this the scar that once thine eyes looked on in the halls of Troy? Yea, she said, it is the very scar, and now I know that thou art no ghost and no lying shape, but Odysseus' self come to be my love and Lord. And she looked most sweetly in his eyes. Now the wanderer wavered no more, but put out his arms to gather her to his heart. Now the red star was hidden on his breast. Now the red drops dripped from the star upon his mail, and the face of her who is the world's desire grew soft in the shadow of his helm, while her eyes were melted to tears beneath his kiss. The gods send all lovers like joy. Softly she sighed, softly drew back from his arms, and her lips were open to speak when a change came over her face. The kind eyes were full of fear again, as she gazed where, through the window of the shrine of alabaster, the sunlight flickered in gold upon the chapel floor. What was that which flickered in the sunlight? Or was it only the dance of the motes in the beam? There was no shadow cast in the sunshine. Why did she gaze as if she saw another watching this meeting of their loves? However it chanced, she mastered her fear. There was even a smile on her lips and mirth in her eyes as she turned and spoke again. Odysseus, thou art indeed the cunningest of men. Thou hast stolen my secret by thy craft. Who save thee would dream of craft in such an hour? For when I thought thee Paris, and thy face was hidden by thy helm, I called on Odysseus in my terror as a child cries to a mother. Methinks I have ever held him dear. Always I have found him ready at need, though the gods have willed that till this hour my love might not be known, nay, not to my own heart. So I called on Odysseus, and those words were wrung from me to scare false Paris back to his own place. But the words that should have driven Paris down to hell drew Odysseus to my breast, and now it is done, and I will not go back upon my words, for we have kissed our kiss of troth. Before the immortal gods have we kissed, and those ghosts who guard the way to Helen. and whom thou alone couldst pass, as it was fated, are witnesses to our oath. And now the ghosts depart, for no more need they guard the beauty of Helen. It is given to thee to have and keep. And now is Helen once more a very woman, for at thy kiss the curse was broken. Ah, friend, since my lord died in pleasant Lacedaemon, what things have I seen and suffered by the gods' decree? But two things I will tell thee, Odysseus, and thou shalt read them as thou mayest. Though never before in thy life days did thy lips touch mine, yet I know that not now for the first time we kiss. And this I know also, for the gods have set it in my heart, that though our love shall be short, and little joy shall we have one of another, yet death shall not end it. For Odysseus, I am a daughter of the gods, and though I sleep and forget that which has been in my sleep, and though my shape change, as but now it seemed to change in the eyes of those ripe to die, yet I die not. And for thee, though thou art mortal, death shall be but as the short summer nights that mark off day from day. For thou shalt live again, Odysseus, as thou hast lived before, and life by life we shall meet, and love to the end is come. As the wanderer listened, he thought once more of that dream of Meriamun the queen, which the priest Ray had told him. But he said nothing of it to Helen, for about the queen and her words to him it seemed wisest not to speak. It will be well to live, lady, if life by life I find thee for love. Life by life thou shalt find me, Odysseus, in this shape or in that shalt thou find me. For beauty has many forms, and love has many names, but thou shalt ever find me but to lose me again. I tell thee that as but now thou wendest thy way through the ranks of those who watch me, the cloud lifted from my mind, and I remembered, and I foresaw, and I knew why I, the loved of many, might never love in turn. I knew then, Odysseus, that I am but the instrument of the gods, who use me for their ends, and I knew that I loved thee and thee only, but with a love that began before the birth bed, and shall not be consumed by the funeral flame. So be it, lady, said the wanderer, for this I know, that never have I loved woman or goddess as I love thee, who art henceforth as the heart in my breast, that without which I may not live. Now speak on, she said, for such words as these are like music in my ears. I will speak on. Short shall be our love, thou sayest, lady, and my own heart tells me that it is born to be brief of days. I know that now I go on my last voyaging, and that death comes upon me from the water, the swiftest death that may be. This then I would dare to ask, when shall we twain be one? For if the hours of life be short, let us love while we may. Now Helen's golden hair fell before her eyes like the bride's veil, and she was silent for a time. Then she spoke. Not now, and not while I dwell in this holy place, may we be wed, Odysseus, for so should we call down upon us the hate of gods and men. Tell me, then, where thou dwellest in the city, and I will come to thee. Nay, it is not meet. Hearken, Odysseus, tomorrow, 1 hour before the midnight, see that thou dost stand without the pylon gates of this my temple. Then I will pass out to thee as well I may, and thou shalt know me by the jewel, the starstone on my breast that shines through the darkness, and by that alone, and lead me whither thou wilt. For then thou shalt be my lord, and I will be thy wife. And thereafter, as the gods show us, so will we go. For know It is in my mind to fly this land of Kim, where month by month the gods have made the people die for me. So till then, farewell, Odysseus, my love, found after many days. It is well, lady, answered the wanderer. Tomorrow night I meet thee without the pylon gates. I also am minded to fly this land of witchcraft and of horror, but I may scarce depart till Pharaoh return again, for he has gone down to battle and left me to guard his palace. Of that we will talk hereafter. Go now, go swiftly, for here we may not talk more of earthly love, said the golden Helen. Then he took her hand and kissed it, and passed from before her glory as a man amazed. But in his foolish wisdom he spoke no word to her of Meriamun the Queen. End of Book 2, Chapter 7. Recording by Marcel D. Ward, thesoulexpands.com.
Book 2, Chapter 8 of The World's Desire. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Annie Hill. The World's Desire by H. Rider Haggard. Chapter 8. The Loosing of the Spirit of Ray. Ray the priest had fled with what speed he might from the gates of death, those gates that guarded the loveliness of Helen and opened only upon men doomed to die. The old man was heavy at heart, for he loved the Wanderer. Among the dark children of Khem he had seen none like this Achaean, none so goodly, so strong, and so well versed in all arts of war. He remembered how this man had saved the life of her he loved above all women, of Meriamun the Moonchild, the fairest queen who had sat upon the throne of Egypt, the fairest and the most learned, save Taia only. He bethought him of the Wanderer's beauty as he stood upon the board while the long shafts hailed down the hall. Then he recalled the vision of Meriamun, which she had told him long years ago, and the shadow in a golden helm which watched the changed Hataska. The more he thought, the more he was perplexed and lost in wonder. What did the gods intend? Of one thing he was sure. The leaders of the host of dreams had mocked Meriamun. The man of her vision would never be her love. He had gone to meet his doom at the door of the chapel perilous. So Ray hasted on, stumbling in his speed, till he came to the palace and passed through its halls towards his chamber. At the entrance of her own place he met Meriamun the Queen. There she stood in the doorway like a picture in its sculptured frame, nor could any sight be more beautiful than she was, clad in her royal robes and crowned with the golden snakes. Her black hair lay soft and deep on her, and her eyes looked strangely forth from beneath the ivory of her brow. He bowed low before her, and would have passed on, but she stayed him. "Whither goest thou, Ray?" she asked. "And why is thy face so sad?" "I go about my business, Queen," he answered, "and I am sad because no tidings come of Pharaoh, nor of how it has fared with him and the host of Apura. Perchance thou speakest truth, and yet not all the truth," she answered. "Enter, I would have speech with thee." So he entered, and at her command seated himself before her in the very seat where the Wanderer had sat. Now, as he sat thus, of a sudden Meriamun the Queen slid to her knees before him, and tears were in her eyes, and her breast was shaken with sobs. And while he wondered, thinking that she wept at last for her son who was dead among the firstborn, she hid her face in her hands upon his knees and trembled. "What ails thee, Queen, my fosterling?" he said. But she only took his hand and laid her own on it, and the old priest's eyes were dim with tears. So she sat for a while, And then she looked up, but still she did not find words. And he caressed the beautiful imperial head that no man had seen bowed before. "What is it, my daughter?" he said, and she answered at last, "Hear me, old friend, who art my only friend, for if I speak not my heart will surely burst. Or if it break not, my brain will burn, and I shall be no more a queen, but a living darkness, where vapours creep, and wandering lights shine faintly on the ruin of my mind. Mindest thou that hour? It was the night after the hateful night that saw me Pharaoh's wife, when I crept to thee and told thee the vision that had come upon my soul, had come to mock me even at Pharaoh's side?" "I mind it well," said Rei. "It was a strange vision, nor might my wisdom interpret it." "And mindest thou what I told thee of the man of my vision, the glorious man whom I must love? He who was clad in golden armour and wore a golden helm wherein a spear point of bronze stood fast?" "Yes, I mind it," said Rei. "And how is that man named?" she asked, whispering and staring on him with wide eyes. "Is he not named Eperitus, the Wanderer? And hath he not come hither, the spear point in his helm? And is not the hand of fate upon me, Meriamun? Hearken, Rei, hearken! I love him as it was fated I should love. When first I looked on him as he came up the hall of audience in his glory, I knew him. I knew him for that man who shares the curse laid aforetime on him, and on the woman, and on me, when in an unknown place twain became three and were doomed to strive from life to life and work each other's woe upon the earth. I knew him, Rei, though he knew me not, and I say that my soul shook at the echo of his step, and my heart blossomed as the black earth blossoms when after flood Sihor seeks his banks again. A glory came upon me, Rei, and I looked back through all the mists of time and knew him for my love, and I looked forward into the depths of time to be and knew him for my love. Then I looked on the present hour, and naught could I see but darkness, and naught could I hear but the groans of dying men, and a shrill sound as of a woman singing. "An ill tale, Queen," said Rei. "Ay, an ill tale, Rei, but half untold. Hearken again, I will tell thee all. Madness hath entered into me from the Hathor of Atarhechis, the Queen of Desire. I am mad with love, even I who never loved. Oh, Rei, Rei, I would win this man. Nay, look not so sternly on me. It is fate that drives me on. Last night I spoke to him and discovered to him the name he hides from us, his own name, Odysseus, Laertes' son, Odysseus of Ithaca. Ay, thou startest, but so it is. I learned it by magic, and wrung the truth even from the guile of the most crafty of men. But it seemed to me that he turned from me, though this much I won from him, that he had journeyed from far to seek me, the bride that the Gods have promised him." The priest leaped up from his seat. "Lady," he cried, "Lady, whom I serve and whom I have loved from a child, thy brain is sick, and not thy heart. Thou canst not love him. Dost thou not remember that thou art Queen of Khem and Pharaoh's wife? Wilt thou throw thy honour in the mire to be trampled by a wandering stranger?" "Ay," she answered, "I am Queen of Khem and Pharaoh's wife, but never Pharaoh's love. Honour! Why dost thou prate to me of honour? Like Nile in flood, my love hath burst the bulwark of my honour, and I mark not where custom set it, for all around the waters seethe and foam, and on them, like a broken lily, floats the wreck of my lost honour. Talk not to me of honour, Rei. Teach me rather how I may win my hero to my arms. "Thou art mad indeed," he groaned. "Nevertheless, I had forgotten. This must needs end in words and tears. Meriamun, I bring thee tidings. He whom thou desireth is lost to thee for ever, to thee and all the world." She heard, then sprang from the couch, and stood over him like a lioness over a smitten stag, her fierce and lovely face alive with rage and fear. "Is he dead?" she hissed in his ear. "Dead, and I knew it not? Then thou hast murdered him, and thus I avenge his murder." With the word she snatched a dagger from her girdle, that same dagger with which she had once struck at Meneptah her brother, when he would have kissed her, and high it flashed above Rei the priest. "Nay," she went on, letting the knife fall, "after another fashion shalt thou die. More slowly, Rei, yes, more slowly. Thou knowest the torment of the palm tree? By that thou shalt die." She paused and stood above him with quivering limbs, and breast that heaved, and eyes that flashed like stars. "Stay, stay!" he cried. "It is not I who have slain this Wanderer, if he indeed is dead, but his own folly. For he is gone to look upon the strange Hathor, and those who look upon the Hathor do battle with the unseen swords, and those who do battle with the unseen swords must lie in the baths of bronze and seek the underworld." The face of Meriamun grew white at this word, as the alabaster of the walls, and she cried aloud with a great cry. Then she sank upon the couch, pressing her hand to her brow and moaning. "How may I save him? How may I save him from that accursed witch? Alas, it is too late, but at least I will know his end, ay, and hear of the beauty of her who slays him." "Rei," she whispered, "not in the speech of Khem, but in the dead tongue of a dead people. Be not wrath with me. Oh, have pity on my weakness. Thou knowest of the putting forth of the Spirit, is it not so?" "I am instructed," he answered in the same speech. "'Twas I who taught thee this art, I and that ancient evil which is thine. True, it was thou, Rei. Thou hast ever loved me, so thou swearest, and many a deed of dread have we shared together. Lend me thy spirit, Rei, that I may send it forth to the temple of the false Hathor, and learn what passes in the temple, and of the death of him whom I must love." "An ill deed, Meriamun, and a fearful," he answered. "For there shall my spirit meet them who watch the gates, and who knows what may chance when the bodiless one that yet hath earthly life meets the bodiless ones who live no more on earth? Yet wilt thou dare it, Rei, for love of me, as being instructed thou alone canst do?" she pleaded. "Never have I refused thee aught, Meriamun, nor will I say thee nay. This only I ask of thee, that if my spirit comes back no more, thou wilt bury me in that tomb which I have made ready by Thebes, and if it may be, by thy strength of magic wring me from the power of the strange wardens. I am prepared. Thou knowest the spell. Say it." He sank back in the carven couch and looked upwards. Then Meriamun drew near to him, gazed into his eyes, and whispered in his ear in that dead tongue she knew. And as she whispered the face of Rei grew like the face of one dead. She drew back and spoke aloud. "Art thou loosed, Spirit of Rei?" Then the lips of Rei answered her, saying, "I am loosed, Meriamun. Whither shall I go?" "To the court of the Temple of Hathor, that is before the shrine." "It is done, Meriamun." "What seest thou?" "I see a man clad in golden armour. He stands with buckler raised before the doorway of the shrine, and before him are the ghosts of heroes dead, though he may not see them with the eyes of the flesh. From within the shrine there comes a sound of singing, and he listens to the singing. What does he hear? Then the loosed spirit of Rei, the priest, told Meriamun, the queen, all the words of the song that Helen sang. And when she heard and knew that it was Argive Helen who sat in the halls of Hathor, the heart of the queen grew faint within her, and her knees trembled. Yet more did she tremble when she learned those words that rang like the words she herself had heard in her vision long ago, telling of bliss that had been, of the hate of the gods, and of the unending quest. Now the song ended, and the Wanderer went up against the ghosts, and the spirit of Rei, speaking with the lips of Rei, told all that befell, while Meriamun hearkened with open ears, and cried aloud with joy when the Wanderer forced his path through the invisible swords. Then once more the sweet voice rang, and the loosed spirit of Rei told the words she sang, and to Meriamun they seemed fateful. Then he told her all the talk that passed between the Wanderer and the ghosts. Now the ghosts being gone, she bade the spirit of Rei follow the Wanderer up the sanctuary, and from the loosed spirit she heard how he rent the web, and of all the words of Helen, and of the craft of him who feigned to be Paris. Then the web was torn, and the eyes of the spirit Rei looked on the beauty of her who was behind it. "Tell me of the face of the false Hathor," said the Queen. And the spirit of Rei answered, "Her face is that beauty which gathered like a mask upon the face of dead Hataska, and upon the face of the Bai, and the face of the Ka, when thou spakest with the spirit of her thou hadst slain." Now Meriamun groaned aloud, for she knew that doom was on her. Last of all she heard the telling of the loves of Odysseus and of Helen, her undying foe, of their kiss, of their betrothal, and of that marriage which should be on the morrow night. Meriamun the Queen said never a word, but when all was done, and the Wanderer had left the shrine again, she whispered in the ear of Rei the priest, and drew back his spirit to him so that he awoke as a man awakes from sleep. He awoke and saw the Queen sitting over against him with a face white as the face of the dead, and about her deep eyes were lines of black. "Hast thou heard, Meriamun?" he asked. "I have heard," she answered. "What dreadful thing hast thou heard?" he asked again, for he knew naught of that which his spirit had seen. "I have heard things that may not be told," she said. "But this I will tell thee. He of whom we spoke hath passed the ghosts. He hath met with the false Hathor, that accursed woman, and he returns here all unharmed. Now go, Rei." End of chapter 8. Book 2 of Chapter 9 of The World's Desire. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Annie Hill. The World's Desire by H. Rider Haggard. Chapter 9. The Waking of the Sleeper. Rei departed, wondering and heavy at heart, and Meriamun the Queen passed into her bedchamber, and there she bade the eunuchs suffer none to enter, made fast the doors, and threw herself down upon the bed, hiding her face in its woven cushions. Thus she lay for many hours as one dead, till the darkness of the evening gathered in the chamber. But though she moved not, yet in her heart there burned a fire, now white with heat as the breath of her passion fanned it, and now waning black and dull as the tears fell from her eyes. For now she knew all, the long foreboding, sometimes dreaded, sometimes desired, and again, like a dream half forgotten, was indeed being fulfilled. She knew of the devouring love that must eat her life away, knew that even in the grave she should find no rest, and her foe was no longer a face beheld in a vision, but a living woman. the fairest and most favoured Helen of Troy, Argive Helen, the false Hathor, the torch that fired great cities, the centre of all desires, whose life was the daily doom of men. Miriam was beautiful, but her beauty paled before the face of Helen, as a fire is slain by the sun. Magic she had also, more than any who were on the earth. But what would her spells avail against the magic of those changing eyes? And it was Helen whom the Wanderer came to seek. For her he had travelled the wide lands and sailed the seas. But when he told her of one whom he desired, one whom he sought, she had deemed that she herself was that one, ay, and had told him all. At that thought she laughed loud in the madness of her anger and her shame. And he had smiled and spoken of Pharaoh her lord, and the while he spoke he had thought not on her but of the golden Helen. Now this at least she swore, that if he might not be hers, never should he be Helen's. She would see him dead ere that hour, ay, and herself, and if it might be, Helen would she see dead also. To what counsel should she turn? On the morrow night these two meet. On the morrow night they would fly together. Then on the morrow must the Wanderer be slain. How should he be slain and leave no tale of murder? By poison he might die, and Kurri the Sidonian should be charged to give the cup. And then she would slay Kurri, saying that he had poisoned the Wanderer because of his hate and the loss of his goods and freedom. And yet how could she slay her love? If once she slew him, then she too must die and seek her joy in the kingdom that Osiris rules, and there she might find little gladness. What then should she do? No answer came into her heart. There was one that must answer in her soul. Now she rose from the bed, and stood for a while staring into the dark. Then she groped her way to a place where there was a carven chest of olive wood and ivory, and drawing a key from her girdle she opened the chest. Within were jewels, mirrors, and unguents in jars of alabaster, ay, and poisons of deadly bane. But she touched none of these. Thrusting her hand deep into the chest, she drew forth a casket of dark metal that the people deemed unholy, a casket made of Typhon's bone, for so they called grey iron. She pressed a secret spring. It opened, and feeling within she found a smaller casket. Lifting it to her lips, she whispered over it words of no living speech, and in the heavy and scented dark a low flame flickered and trembled on her lips, as she murmured in the tongue of a dead people. Then slowly the lid opened of itself, like a living mouth that opens, and as it opened, a gleam of light stole up from the box into the dusk of the chamber. Now Meriamun looked, and shuddered as she looked. Yet she put her hand into the box, and muttering, come forth, thou ancient evil," drew somewhat to her and held it out from her on the palm of her hand. Behold, it glowed in the dusk of the chamber as a live ember glows among the ashes of the hearth. Red it glowed, and green, and white, and livid blue, and its shape, as it lay upon her hand, was the shape of a coiling snake, cut, as it were, in opal and in emerald. For a while she gazed upon it, shuddering as one in doubt. "Minded I am to let thee sleep, thou horror," she murmured. "Twice have I looked on thee, and I would look no more. Nay, I will dare it, thou gift of the old wisdom, thou frozen fire, thou sleeping sin, thou living death of the ancient city, for thou alone hast wisdom." Thereon she unclasped the bosom of her robe, and laid the gleaming toy, that seemed a snake of stone, upon her ivory breast, though she trembled at its icy touch, for it was more cold than death. With both her hands she clasped a pillar of the chamber, and so stood, and she was shaken with throes like the pangs of childbirth. Thus she endured a while till that which was a cold grew warm, watching its brightness that shone through her silken dress as the flame of a lamp shines through an alabaster vase. So she stood for an hour, then swiftly put off all her robes and ornaments of gold, and loosing the dark masses of her hair, let it fall round her like a veil. Now she bent her head down to her breast, and breathed on that which lay upon her breast. For the ancient evil can live only in the breath of humankind. Thrice she breathed upon it, thrice she whispered, "Awake, awake, awake!" And the first time that she breathed, the thing stirred and sparkled. The second time that she breathed, it undid its shining folds, and reared its head to hers. The third time that she breathed, it slid from her bosom to the floor, then coiled itself about her feet, and slowly grew as grows the magician's magic tree. Greater it grew, and greater yet, and as it grew it shone like a torch in a tomb, and wound itself about the body of Meriamun, wrapping her in its fiery folds till it reached her middle. Then it reared its head on high, and from its eyes there flowed a light like the light of a flame, and lo, its face was the face of a fair woman. It was the face of Meriamun. Now face looked on face, and eyes glared into eyes. Still as a white statue of the Gods stood Meriamun the Queen, and all about her form and in and out of her dark hair twined the flaming snake. At length the evil spoke with a human voice, with the voice of Meriamun, but in the dead speech of a dead people. "Tell me my name," it said. "Sin is thy name," answered Meriamun the Queen. "Tell me whence I came," it said again. "From the evil that is in me," answered Meriamun. "Tell me whither I go." "Where I go, there thou goest, for I have warmed thee in my breast, and thou art twined about my heart." Then the snake lifted up its human head and laughed horribly. "Well art thou instructed," it said. "So I love thee as thou lovest me," and it bent itself and kissed her on the lips. "I am that ancient evil, that life which endures out of the first death. I am that death which abides in the living life. I am that which brought on thee the woe that is in division from the heart's desire, and the name thereof is Hell. From life to life thou hast found me at thy hand, now in this shape, now in that. I taught thee the magic which thou knowest. I showed thee how to win the throne. Now what wilt thou of me, Meriamun, my mother, my sister, and my child? From life to life I have been with thee. Ever thou mightest have put me from thee, ever thou fliest to the wisdom which I have, and ever from thee I draw my strength, for though without me thou mightest live, without thee I must die. Say now, what is it? Tell me, and I will name my price. No more will I ask than must be, for I am glad to wake and live again, glad to grip thy soul within these shining folds, to be fair with thy beauty, to be foul with thy sin. "Lay thy ancient lips against my ear, and thine ear against my lips," said Meriamun the Queen, "and I will say what it is that I will of thee, thou ancient evil." So the human-headed evil laid its ear against the lips of Meriamun, and Meriamun laid her lips against its ear, and they whispered each to each. There in the darkness they whispered, while the witch-light glittered down the grey snake's shining folds, beamed in its eyes, and shone through the Queen's dark hair and on her snowy breast. At length the tale was told, and the snake lifted its woman's head high in the air, and again it laughed. "He seeks the good," it said, "and he shall find the ill. He looks for light, and in darkness he shall wander. To love he turns, in lust he shall be lost. He would win the golden Helen, whom he has sought through many a way, whom he has followed o'er many a sea, but first shall he find thee, Meriamun, and through thee death. For he shall swear by the snake who should have sworn by the star. Far hath he wandered, further shall he wander yet, for thy sin shall be his sin. Darkness shall wear the face of light, evil shall shine like good. I will give him to thee, Meriamun, but hearken to my price. No more must I be laid cold in the gloom while thou walkest in the sunshine. Nay, I must be twined about thy body. Fear not, fear not, I shall seem but a jewel in the eyes of men, a girdle fashioned cunningly for the body of a queen. But with thee henceforth I must ever go, and when thou diest, with thee I must die, and with thee pass where thou dost pass, with thee to sleep, with thee to wake again, and so on, till in the end I win, or thou winnest, or she wins who is our foe. I give thee thy price, said Meriamun the Queen. So once before thou didst give it, answered the evil, aye, far, far away, beneath a golden sky, and in another clime. Happy wast thou then with him that dost desire, but I twined myself about thy heart, and of twain came three, and all the sorrow that has been. So woman thou hast worked, so woman it is ordained, for thou art she in whom all woes are gathered, in whom all love is fulfilled. And I have dragged thy glory down, woman, and I have loosed thee from thy gentleness, and set it free upon the earth, and Beauty is she named. By beauty doth she work, who is the golden Helen, and for her beauty's sake that all men strive to win, our wars and woes, our hopes and prayers, and longings without end. But by evil dost thou work who art divorced from innocence, and evil shalt thou ever bring on him who thou desireth. Our riddle, read it who may, read it if thou canst, thou who art named Meriamun the Queen. But who art less than Queen and more? Who art thou? Who is she they named the Helen? Who is that wanderer who seeks her from afar? And who am I? A riddle that thou mayst not read. Yet is the answer written on earth and sky and sea and in the hearts of men. Now hearken. To-morrow night thou shalt take me and twine me about thy body, doing as I bid thee, and behold, for a while thy shape shall wear the shape of the golden Helen, and thy face shall be as her face, and thine eyes as her eyes, and thy voice as her voice. Then I leave the rest to thee, for as Helen's self thou shalt beguile the Wanderer, and once, if only once, to be a wife to him whom thou desireth. Naught can I tell thee of the future, I who am but a counsellor, but hereafter it may be that woes will come, woes and wars and death. But what matter these, when thou hast had thy desire? When he hath sinned, and hath sworn by the snake who should have sworn by the star, and when he is bound to thee by ties that may not be loosed? Choose, Meriamun, choose. Put my counsel from thee, and to-morrow this man thou lovest shall be lost to thee, lost in the arms of Helen, and alone for many years shalt thou bear the burden of thy lonely love. Take it, and he shall at least be thine. Let come what may come. Think on it, and choose. Thus spake the ancient evil, tempting her who was named Meriamun, while she hearkened to the tempting. I have chosen, she said. I will wear the shape of Helen, and be a wife to him I love, and then let ruin fall. Sleep, thou ancient evil, sleep, for no more may I endure thy face of fear that is my face, nor the light of those flaming eyes that are my eyes made mad. Again the thing reared its human head and laughed out in triumph. Then slowly it unloosed its gleaming coils, slowly it slid to the earth, and shrank and withered like a flaming scroll, till at length it seemed once more but a shining jewel of opal and of amethyst. The Wanderer, when he left the inner secret shrine, saw no more the guardians of the gates, nor heard the clash of the swords unseen, for the gods had given the beauty of Helen to Odysseus of Ithaca, as it was foretold. Without the curtains the priests of the temple were gathered, wondering. Little could they understand how it came to pass that the hero who was called Eperitus had vanished through the curtains and had not been smitten down by the unseen swords. And when they saw him come forth, glorious and unharmed, they cried aloud with fear. But he laughed and said, "Fear not. Victory is to him whom the gods appoint. I have done battle with the wardens of the shrine, and passed them, and methinks that they are gone. I have looked upon the Hathor also, and more than that seek ye not to know. Now give me food, for I am weary." So they bowed before him, and leading him thence to their chamber of banquets, gave him of their best, and watched him while he ate and drank, and put from him the desire of food. Then he rose and went from the temple, and again the priests bowed before him. Moreover, they gave him freedom of the temple, and keys whereby all the doors might be opened, though little, as they thought, had he any need of keys. Now the Wanderer, walking gladly and light of heart, came to his own lodgings in the courts of the palace. At the door of the lodging stood Rei the priest, who, when he saw him, ran to him and embraced him, so glad was he that the Wanderer had escaped alive. "Little did I think to look upon thee again, Eperitus," he said, "had it not been for that which the Queen—" and he bethought himself and stayed his speech. "Nevertheless, here I am unhurt of ghost or men," the Wanderer answered, laughing as he passed into the lodging. "But what of the Queen?" "Naught, Eperitus, naught, save that she was grieved when she learned that thou hadst gone up to the temple of the Hathor, there, as she thought, to perish. Hearken thou, Eperitus, I know not if thou art god or man, but oaths are binding both men and gods, and thou didst swear an oath to Pharaoh. Is it not so?" "Ay, Rei, I swore an oath that I would guard the Queen well till Pharaoh came again." "Art thou minded to keep that oath, Eperitus?" asked Rei, looking on him strangely. "Art thou minded to guard the fair fame of Pharaoh's Queen, that is more precious than her life? Methinks thou dost understand my meaning, Eperitus." "Perchance I understand," answered the Wanderer. "Know, Rei, that I am so minded." Then Rei spake again darkly. "Methinks some sickness hath smitten Meriamun the Queen, and she craves thee for her physician. Now things come about as they were foreshown in the portent of that vision whereof I spoke to thee. But if thou dost break thy oath to him, whose salt thou eatest then, Eperitus, god or man? Thou art a dastard." "Have I not said that I have no mind so to break mine oath?" he answered, then sank his head upon his breast and communed with his crafty heart while Rei watched him. Presently he lifted up his head and spoke. "Rei," he said, "I am minded to tell thee a strange story and a true, for this I see, that our will runs one way, and thou canst help me, and in helping me, thyself and Pharaoh, to whom I swore an oath, and her whose honour thou holdest dear. But this I warn thee, Rei, that if thou dost betray me, not thine age, not thy office, nor the friendship thou hast shown me, shall save thee." "Speak on, Odysseus, Laertes' son, Odysseus of Ithaca," said Rei. "May my life be forfeit if I betray thy counsel, if it harm not those I serve." Now the Wanderer started to his feet, crying, "How knowest that name?" "I know it," said Rei, "and I tell thee that I know it, thou most crafty of men, to show this, that with me thy guile will not avail thee." For he would not tell him that he had it from the lips of the Queen. "Thou hast heard a name that had been in the mouths of many," said the Wanderer. "Perchance it is mine, perchance it is the name of another. It matters not. Now know this, I fear this Queen of thine. Hither I came to seek a woman, but the Queen I came not to seek. Yet I have not come in vain, for yonder, Rei, yonder in the temple of the Hathor, I found her on whose quest I came, and who awaited me there well guarded till I should come to take her. On the morrow night I go forth to the temple, and there by the gates of the temple I shall find her whom all men desire, but who loves me alone among men, for so it has been fated of the Gods. Thence I bring her hither that here we may be wed. Now this is my mind. If thou wilt aid me with a ship and men, that at the first light of dawn we should flee this land of thine, and that thou shouldst keep my going secret for a while till I have gained the sea. True it is that I swore to guide the Queen till Pharaoh come again, but as thou knowest, things are so that I can best guard her by my flight. And if Pharaoh thinks ill of me, so it must be. Moreover, I ask thee to meet me by the pylon of the Temple of Hathor to-morrow at 1 hour before midnight. There we will talk with her who is called the Hathor, and prepare our flight, and thence thou shalt go to that ship which thou hast made ready." Now Rei thought for a while, and answered, "Somewhat I fear to look upon this Goddess, yet I will dare it. Tell me then, how shall I know her at the temple's gate?" "Thou shalt know her, Rei, by the red star which burns upon her breast. But fear not, for I will be there. Say, wilt thou make the ship ready?" "The ship shall be ready, Eperitus. And though I love thee well, I say this, that I would it rode the waves which roll around the shores of Khem, and thou wert with it, and with thee she who is called the Hathor, that Goddess whom thou desirest." End of chapter 9. Book 2, Chapter 10 of The World's Desire. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Annie Hill. The World's Desire by H. Rider Haggard. Chapter 10. The Oath of the Wanderer. That night the Wanderer saw not Meriamun, but on the morrow she sent a messenger to him, bidding him to her feast that night. He had little heart to go, but a queen's courtesy is a command, and he went at sundown. Rei also went to the feast, and as he went, meeting the Wanderer in the antechamber, he whispered to him that all things were made ready, that a good ship waited him in the harbour, the very ship that he had captured from the Sidonians, and that he, Rei, would be with him by the pylon gate of the temple 1 hour before midnight. Presently, as he whispered, the doors were flung wide, and Meriamun the Queen passed in, followed by eunuchs and waiting women. She was royally arrayed. Her face was pale and cold, but her great eyes glowed in it. Lo, the Wanderer bowed before her. She bent her head in answer, then gave him her hand, and he led her to the feast. They sat there side by side, but the Queen spoke little, and that little of Pharaoh, and the host of the Apura, from whom no tidings came. When at length the feast was done, Meriamun bade the Wanderer to her private chamber, and thither he went for a while, though sorely against his will. But Rei came not in with them, and thus he was left alone with the Queen, for she dismissed the waiting ladies. When they had gone, there was silence for a space, but ever the Wanderer felt the eyes of Meriamun watching him, as though they would read his heart. "I am weary," she said at length. "Tell me of the wanderings, Odysseus of Ithaca. Nay, tell me of the siege of Ilios, of the sinful Helen who brought all these woes about. Ay, and tell me how thou didst creep from the leaguers of the Achæans, and, wrapped in a beggar's weeds, seek speech of this evil Helen, now justly slain of the angry Gods." "Justly slain is she indeed," answered the crafty Wanderer. "An ill thing it is, truly, that the lives of so many heroes should be lost because of the beauty of a faithless woman. I had it in my own heart to slay her when I spoke with her in Troy town, but the Gods held my hand." Was it so indeed? Said the Queen, smiling darkly. Doubtless if she yet lived, and thou sawest her, thou wouldst slay her. Is it not so, Odysseus? She lives no more, O Queen, he answered. Nay, she lives no more, Odysseus. Now tell me, yesterday thou wentest up to the temple of the Hathor. Tell me what thou didst see in the temple. I saw a fair woman, or perchance an immortal goddess, stand upon the pylon brow, and as she stood and sang, those who looked were bereft of reason. And thereafter some tried to pass the ghosts who guarded the woman, and were slain of invisible swords. It was a strange sight to see. A strange sight surely, but thou didst not lose thy craft, Odysseus, nor try to break through the ghosts? Nay, Meriam, in my youth I looked upon the beauty of Argive Helen, who was fairer than she who stood on the pylon tower. None who have looked upon the Helen would seek to win the Hathor. But perchance those who have looked upon the Hathor may seek to win the Helen, she answered slowly, and he knew not what to say, for he felt the power of her magic on him. So for a while they spoke, and Meriamun, knowing all, wondered much at the guile of the Wanderer, but she showed no wonder in her face. At length he rose and, bowing before her, said that he must visit the guard that watched the palace gates. She looked upon him strangely, and bade him go. Then he went, and right glad he was thus to be free of her. But when the curtains had swung behind him, Meriamun the Queen sprang to her feet, and a dreadful light of daring burned in her eyes. She clapped her hands, and bade those who came to her seek their rest, as she would also, for she was weary, and needed none to wait upon her. So the women went, leaving her alone, and she passed into her sleeping chamber. Now must the bride deck herself for the bridal, she said, and straightway, pausing not, drew forth the ancient evil from its hiding place, and warmed it on her breast, breathing the breath of life into its nostrils. Now as before it grew, and wound itself about her, and whispered in her ear, bidding her clothe herself in bridal white and clasp the evil around her. Then think upon the beauty she had seen gather on the face of dead Hataska in the temple of Osiris, and on the face of the Bai, and the face of the Ka. She did its command, fearing nothing, for her heart was alight with love, and torn with jealous hate, and little did she reck of the sorrows which her sin should bring forth. So she bathed herself in perfumes, shook out her shining hair, and clad herself in white attire. Then she looked upon her beauty in the mirror of silver, and cried in the bitterness of her heart to the evil that lay beside her like a snake asleep. Ah, am I not fairy now to win him whom I love? Say, thou evil, must I indeed steal the beauty of another to win him whom I love? This thou must do, said the evil, or lose him in Helen's arms, for though thou art fair, yet is she beauty's self, and her gentleness he loves, and not thy pride. Choose, choose swiftly, for presently the Wanderer goes forth to win the golden Helen. Then she doubted no more, but lifting the shining evil, held it to her. With a dreadful laugh it twined itself about her, and lo, it shrank to the shape of a girdling, double-headed snake of gold, with eyes of ruby flame. And as it shrank, Meriamun the Queen thought on the beauty she had seen upon the face of the dead Hataska, on the face of the Bai, and the face of the Ka, and all the while she watched her beauty in the mirror. And as she watched, behold, her face grew as the face of death, ashen and hollow, then slowly burned into life again. But all her loveliness was changed. Changed were her dark locks to locks of gold. Changed were her deep eyes to eyes of blue. Changed was the glory of her pride to the sweetness of the Helen's smile. Fairest among women had been her form, now it was fairer yet, and now she was beauty's self, and like to swoon at the dream of her own loveliness. So, so must the Hathor seem, she said, and lo, her voice rang strangely in her ears, for the voice too was changed. It was more soft than the whispering of wind-stirred reeds. It was more sweet than the murmuring of bees at noon. Now she must go forth, and fearful at her own loveliness, and heavy with her sin, yet glad with a strange joy, she passes from her chamber, and glides like a starbeam through the still halls of her palace. The white light of the moon creeps into them and falls upon the faces of the dreadful gods, on the awful smile of sphinxes, and the pictures of her forefathers, kings and queens who long were dead. And as she goes she seems to hear them whisper each to each of the dreadful sin that she has sinned, and of the sorrow that shall be. But she does not heed, and never stays her foot, for her heart is alight as with a flame, and she will win the Wanderer to her arms, the Wanderer sought through many lives, found after many deaths. Now the Wanderer is in his chamber, waiting for the hour to set forth to find the Golden Helen. His heart is alight, and strange dreams of the past go before his eyes, and strange visions of long love to be. His heart burns like a lamp in the blackness, and by that light he sees all the days of his life that have been, and all the wars that he has won, and all the seas that he has sailed. And now he knows that these things are dreams indeed, illusions of the sense, for there is but one thing true in the life of men, and that is love. There is but one thing perfect, the beauty which is love's robe. There is but one thing which all men seek and are born to find at last, the heart of the Golden Helen, the world's desire, that is peace and joy and rest. He binds his armour on him, for foes may lurk in darkness, and takes the bow of Eurytus and the grey bolts of death, for perchance the fight is not yet done. He must cleave his way to joy. Then he combs his locks and sets the golden helm upon them, and praying to the Gods who hear not, he passes from his chamber. Now the chamber opened into a great hall of pillars. As was his custom when he went alone by night, the Wanderer glanced warily down the dusky hall, but he might see little because of the shadows. Nevertheless the moon poured into the centre of the hall from the clerestories in the roof, and lay there shining white as water beneath black banks of reeds. Again the Wanderer glanced with keen, quick eyes, for there was a sense in his heart that he was no more alone in the hall, though whether it were man or ghost, or perchance one of the immortal gods who looked on him, he might not tell. Now it seemed to him that he saw a shape of white moving far away in the shadow. Then he grasped the black bow and laid hand upon his quiver so that the shafts rattled. Now it would seem that the shape in the shadow heard the rattling of the shafts, or perchance saw the moonlight gleam upon the Wanderer's golden harness. At the least it drew near till it came to the edge of the pool of light. There it paused as a bather pauses ere she steps into the fountain. The Wanderer paused also, wondering what the shape might be. Half was he minded to try it with an arrow from the bow, but he held his hand and watched. And as he watched, the white shape glided into the space of moonlight, and he saw that it was the form of a woman draped in white, and that about her shone a gleaming girdle, and in the girdle gems which sparkled like the eyes of a snake. Tall was the shape, and lovely as a statue of Aphrodite, but who or what it was he might not tell, for the head was bent and the face hidden. A while the shape stood thus, and as it stood the Wanderer passed towards it, marvelling much, till he also stood in the pool of moonlight that shimmered on his golden mail. Then suddenly the shape lifted its face so that the light fell full on it, and stretched out its arms towards him, and lo, the face was the face of the Argive Helen, of her whom he went forth to seek. He looked upon its beauty, he looked upon the eyes of blue, upon the golden hair, upon the shining arms, then slowly, very slowly, and in silence, for he could find no words, the Wanderer drew near. She did not move nor speak, so still she stood that scarce she seemed to breathe, only the shining eyes of her snake girdle glittering like living things. Again he stopped fearfully, for he held that this was surely a mocking ghost which stood before him. But still she neither moved nor spoke. Then at length he found his tongue and spoke. "Lady," he whispered, "is it indeed thou? Is it Argive Helen whom I look upon? Or is it perchance a ghost sent by Queen Persephone from the house of Hades to make a mock of me?" Now the voice of Helen answered him in sweet tones and low. "Did I not tell thee, Odysseus of Ithaca? Did I not tell thee yesterday in the halls of Hathor, after thou hadst overcome the ghosts, that to-night we should be wed? Wherefore then dost thou deem me of the number of the bodiless?" The Wanderer hearkened. The voice was the voice of Helen, the eyes were the eyes of Helen, and yet his heart feared guile. "So did Argive Helen tell me of a truth, lady, but this she said, that I should find her by the pylon of the temple, and lead her thence to be my bride. Thither I go but now to seek her. But if thou art Helen, how comest thou to these palace halls? And where, lady, is that red star which should gleam upon thy breast, that star which weeps out the blood of men? No more doth the red dew fall from the star that was set upon my breast, Odysseus. For now that thou hast won me, men die no more for my beauty's sake. Gone is the star of war, and see, wisdom rings me round, the symbol of the deathless snake that signifies love eternal. Thou dost ask how I came hither, I who am immortal and a daughter of the Gods. Seek not to know, Odysseus, for where fate puts it in my mind to be, there do the Gods bear me. Wouldst thou then that I leave thee, Odysseus?" "Last of all things do I desire this," he answered, for now his wisdom went a-wandering. Now he forgot the words of Aphrodite, warning him that the Helen might be known by one thing only, the red star on her breast, whence falls the blood of men, and he no more doubted but that she was the golden Helen. Then she who wore the Helen's shape stretched out her arms and smiled so sweetly that the Wanderer knew nothing any more, save that she drew him to her. Slowly she glided before him, ever smiling, and where she went he followed, as men follow beauty in a dream. She led him through halls and corridors, past the sculptured statues of the Gods, past man-headed sphinxes and pictures of long-dead kings. And as she goes, once more it seems to her that she hears them whisper each to each the horror of her sin and the sorrow that shall be. But naught she heeds whoever leads him on, and naught he hears whoever follows after, till at length, though he knows it not, they stand in the bedchamber of the Queen, by Pharaoh's golden bed. Then once more she speaks. "Odysseus of Ithaca, whom I have loved from the beginning, and whom I shall love till all deaths are done, before thee stands that loveliness which the Gods predestined to thy arms. Now take thou thy bride, but first lay thy hand upon this golden snake that rings me round, the new bridal gift of the Gods, and swear thy marriage oath, which may not be broken. Swear thus, Odysseus: I love thee, woman or immortal, and thee alone, and by whatever name thou art called, and whatever shape thou goest, to thee I will cleave, and to thee alone till the day of the passing of time. I will forgive thy sins, I will soothe thy sorrows, I will suffer none to come betwixt thee and me. This I swear to thee, woman or immortal, who dost stand before me. I swear it to thee, woman, for now and for ever, for here and hereafter, in whatever shape thou goest on the earth, by whatever name thou art known among men. Swear thou thus, Odysseus of Ithaca, Laertes' son, or leave me and go thy ways." "Great is the oath," quoth the Wanderer, for though now he feared no guile, yet his crafty heart liked it ill. "Choose, and choose swiftly," she answered. "Swear the oath, or leave me and never see me more." "Leave thee I will not, and cannot if I would," he said. "Lady, I swear," and he laid his hand upon the snake that ringed her round, and swore the dreadful oath. Yea, he forgot the words of the Goddess, and the words of Helen, and he swore by the Snake, who should have sworn by the Star. By the immortal Gods he swore it, by the symbol of the Snake, and by the beauty of his bride. And as he swore, the eyes of the Serpent sparkled, and the eyes of her who wore the beauty of Helen shone, and faintly the black bow of Eurytus thrilled, foreboding death and war. But little the Wanderer thought on guile or war or death, for the kiss of her whom he deemed the golden Helen was on his lips, and he went up into the golden bed of Meriamun. End of chapter 10.